Hello and welcome to the very quick Fat Boss guide to Ursoc on Mythic in the Emerald Nightmare. And this isn't some sort of bite-sized guide. The reason this is going to be quick is because there isn't too much to talk about. Ursoc on Mythic is purely an output check, and it only has one new mechanic, and that mechanic doesn't really change the heroic strat that you used beforehand.
And just to summarize that heroic strat, just so everyone's on the same page here, that just involves taunting whenever the other tank gets a debuff. You want to slowly move the boss around the room after every single Roaring Cacophony because of the pools on the ground, and you want your entire raid to be underneath the boss to share the damage from the Roaring Cacophony. And you'll also want to assign 2 different groups of players, 10 players in each group, to take turns at sharing the damage from the charge. And the player that's focused by the charge needs to move into the middle of the room. But the new mechanic that's been added to this encounter is the Nightmare Bears. After each set of Roaring Cacophony, a Nightmare Bear will spawn out of one of the pools on the ground. This bear does absolutely nothing apart from melee hit the tank. However, by the time the boss casts his next Roaring Cacophony, the bear will also cast it and just fear everyone in the raid for 20 seconds, and if that happens, it's just a flat out wipe. So you need your DPS to swap to the bear, Hunter's MD it if it spawns away, so your tank definitely picks it up. If you have like a healer in your raid using output cooldown, they could very easily over aggro, so make sure tanks you are picking up this bear, and then just nuke it underneath the boss. And when the bear does die, you need to make sure that you move because he'll also spawn a puddle. And you're probably thinking, well, with all these new puddles that are being spawned by the bear, I'm probably going to run out of space. In fact, it's very unlikely that you're going to run out of space. The boss is probably going to rage and kill your entire raid before that becomes an issue. And the only other thing that's really different on Mythic is that the boss, right at the very start, instead of going into a charge as part of his ability rotation, instead will do a Roaring Cacophony. And this is kind of important when it comes down to damage from your healers.
And that's what everything is about. This whole fight is just about optimizing the amount of DPS and healing that you can do. So we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about a couple of tips and tricks that you guys can do in order for you to achieve that threshold and kill off the boss. So the boss has a 5-minute enrage and has 1.3 billion health. This means that the raid has to have a combined 4.5 million DPS output across the entire fight, which is around 318k sustained DPS across 14 damage dealers. Of course, you do have 2 tanks, and just to make it simple, we'll just say 2 tanks equals 1 DPS, so that means that you'll need to have just under 300k DPS across the entire fight. So that isn't particularly high, and that of course doesn't take into account the damage to the bears, but from the bears you kind of just cleave them down anyway, which we'll talk about in a minute. That isn't particularly high, however you can make this even easier for yourself by having healers do damage on the pool. Because your healers don't need to go straight into healing a charge, they only have to heal 1 Cacophony, and considering it's the first Cacophony, it does like no damage anyway. They can use a pre-pot on the pool, and in this expansion, I don't know if you guys have noticed, healers do a ton of damage if they pre-pot and have cooldowns. They can absolutely annihilate. You can get a good, 10 million damage per healer in that space of time? And across all of them, of course, what is that, 40 million damage? That's a nice chunk of the boss's health pool. That could be the difference between killing it within the enrage and not killing it within the enrage. There's no reason not to do it. Another thing that can help you out is deciding when to bloodlust. You don't want to automatically assume that doing it on the pool is the best time to do it. If you have a ton of Shadow Priests as well as classes that have good execute damage such as Warriors or MM Hunters, you may actually want to save Lust for around 1 minute to 45 seconds before the enrage timer. This will allow the Shadow Priests to extend their Surrender to Madness by a fairly large margin, whilst not really screwing over your other DPS that much, because they can just align their CDs and their second pots, and they'll be doing roughly the same amount of damage, because in this expansion your Trinket procs aren't as strong anymore, so the difference between using Lust on the pool and Lust somewhere else in the encounter isn't actually that big, and if you can give your Shadow Priest and Execute DPS that much more damage by using it then, it can be beneficial to use it at another point. Of course, this completely depends on your composition, and you'll just have to make a judgment call as you're progressing on the fight. And to maximize your DPS even more, when damaging the Nightmare Bear, don't even bother hitting it until it is underneath the boss. And one thing is that for the tanks, you want to make sure that it is going to the tank that has the Rend Flesh, not the other debuff. That other debuff makes it so you are taking increased physical damage, whereas the Rend Flesh just does a dot to you. So get it onto that tank, and once it is underneath there, cleave it down. There's no need to absolutely annihilate it, it just needs to die before the Roaring Cacophonies. Normally multi-dots can do fine, cleaves can do fine, there's lots of passive cleave in this expansion so far, so you should be able to kill them off whilst maximizing the amount of damage you do to the boss. And honestly, apart from that, it's just focusing on your rotation. Fortunately, there isn't that much that you need to think about in this fight in terms of, super mechanics. Just know when you need to be hit by the charge, just know where you have to go when the charge is coming in, and otherwise just absolutely annihilate the fucker, and he should die relatively easily.
Now, in terms of healing this encounter, Really, it's just all about having cooldowns up for the last 20% of the boss's health, and making sure that you don't overlap them, so you always have a cooldown up for every single point where you want to use them. Typically, on Heroic, that was likely on a charge, but for Mythic, I'd actually recommend that you use it on the second Roaring Cacophony instead. The reason for that is that after a charge, the next Roaring Cacophony doesn't come in for quite a long time, in comparison to the gap of time between the second Roaring Cacophony and then the charge. So whack your healing cooldowns on that second Roaring Cacophony, and you'll probably find it a lot less stressful to heal. And the general advice on top of that for your raid, save your damage reductions for when the boss is enraged. The last sort of 10% of the boss's health, that last charge, those last few Roaring Cacophonies are going to be the most deadly. That's when you want to have your personal damage reductions available, your health pots, etc. And yeah, that's it. That's all this encounter is.
Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, then do slap a like on it. It helps us out a lot. And of course, do go and check out our sponsored Discord. Discord is a service where you can make a server for your friends or your guild or pretty much anyone else with voice comms and text channels, and it's all entirely free and very easy to set up. We have our own community Discord server where we talk about raiding and complain about the bear boss and Xavius, or talk about our videos, you know, that kind of stuff. Just generally chill out with you lot, answering questions and stuff like that. It's a load of fun. We're in there quite a lot at the moment, so do check it out. The link is in the description below. And of course, a big shout outs to our supporters on Patreon. You guys keep us doing what we're doing, and we really, really do appreciate it. So thank you so much. And of course, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.